like to do is just give an overview about the different runtimes which exist, which are available, and then as well, like discuss like why, so to say, why we've got those different runtimes available at SAP, and particularly then focus a bit into the Kyma runtime, as it's still kind of the newest one of the offerings. Just elaborate a bit on it, and as well show you some things that you can do there, which, for example, are not possible in Cloud Foundry. So both, of course, have their advantages. So you should see my screen now. Is that correct? Okay, cool.
Yes.
So the main question I would like to answer is like, why is there yet another BTP runtime, which I hear, well, not every now and then, but regularly, like ever since we went live with the Kyma runtime in May of last year. Because, I mean, there was, of course, as you all know, the Cloud Foundry runtime. There's the ABAP runtime, or Steampunk as the project name is, or the product name sometimes is internally. And so the discussion is always, okay, why now as well the Kyma runtime? And this is exactly where I would like to go with in the next couple of minutes. So I'll talk a bit again. I'll talk about the Kyma runtime in detail, but give a high-level introduction first. I will talk about some plans that we have with the Kyma runtime. So that's why, of course, I have to show the disclaimer. But again, where am I coming from? So the extension suite is like one of the two major stories of the business technology platform. Integration suite being the other one. But here, with regards to extension suite, I mean, at some point, I mean, there's low-code, no-code tooling and so on and so forth. But at some point, you might want to, deploy code into the business technology platform. And that's why we offer different runtime choices. And I think like these are really the three major ones. And I would say the ABAP runtime on the right side, I mean, it has its niche, its unique selling proposition. I mean, because ABAP is being the SAP programming language. I mean, it's very unique to SAP, and SAP is the only company offering such a runtime in the cloud. So I think we don't need to discuss like why there's an ABAP runtime. Well, there's a definite, like a defined target group. But the discussions that the questions that I'm rather getting is like, why do we offer a Cloud Foundry runtime and a Kyma runtime? And I think, I mean, both have their their advantages. And if you look into a blog post on sap.com from 2018 already, it's comparing Cloud Foundry to Kubernetes. And the Kyma runtime is really close, or like a thin layer on top of Kubernetes. So I think it's still true as well for comparing Cloud Foundry with Kubernetes. On the one hand, you've got Cloud Foundry, which is providing quite some simplicity, because you can just take your code and you've got build packs, and you just push your code to Cloud Foundry, and you just don't care how it's executed. So it's really, really nice, really comfortable. Whereas when you look into Kubernetes, which is closer to the infrastructure, like the cloud infrastructure for running your code, you can really control how your code is being executed. So you develop something, you typically wrap it up in a Docker container, and when you then start to deploy this to the cloud, to the business technology platform, or to any other Kubernetes platform, you can exactly define how it's executed, which means how many resources do you want to assign to it? What is the minimum? What is the maximum? If you already know like how much scaling you need, you can define like how many replica sets, for example, you want to have of this, so that you have redundancy and so on and so forth. So you really you clearly define this, but this means that on the one hand, Cloud Foundry provides you with the simplicity where you just push your code, and again, this can be very comfortable. Whereas Cloud Foundry, and therefore as well the Kyma runtime, provide you with empowerment, how you want to run your code. But of course, like with empowerment, it means that you have as well a steeper learning curve at the beginning to then exactly do that. Like, I mean, really ensure how your application or how your extension is being executed. And this is then really like the typical decision that you would need to make at the beginning of a project. Do I want to like how complex is it, or like what do I want to do? Is it sufficient if I can deploy the code to Cloud Foundry? And again, I don't want to control it, or if I want to have more control, or maybe there is already Kubernetes knowledge and containerization is anyway standard or de facto standard in your company, and you want to go with microservices and microservice-based architectures and so on, and then maybe Kubernetes and therefore Kyma runtime is the better choice. So that's exactly what we want to provide. We want to provide you with the options to go for one or the other, depending on the use case and as well depending on the demand that you have and as well the knowledge that you have. So what is then the Kyma runtime? So it's really closer to infrastructure as a service. It's a bit more than that. I mean, if you look into Kubernetes, then the next question usually is, okay, well, what do I then get like compared to a hyperscaler? I could just as well go to, I don't know, Azure and get a managed Kubernetes there, or AWS. But Kyma is a bit more, and this is exactly what I would like to elaborate on in the next couple of minutes and show this as well to you. First of all, I mean, in the extension case, what we have within the business technology platform is you have this out-of-the-box connectivity to the solutions on the left side. So it's easy to hook up, for example, customer experience solutions to the Kyma runtime. You then see all the different events and APIs coming, like provided by the particular tenant. And then afterwards, you can react to events. You can call the APIs without further authentication and so on and so forth. So this is like one piece. So this integration into the SAP universe is one piece, of course, which the hyperscalers, for example, can't provide out of the box, because, I mean, we know, like, we work directly with a line of businesses to do this connectivity part and so on and so forth. So for the extension case, it's really nice. Again, if you want to go for microservices and containerization and so on, to then deploy this in Kyma. And I mean, the runtime itself is available on Azure and as well AWS nowadays. We plan to as well make this available on Google Cloud Platform in the near future, so that you can really then run it on the hyperscale of your choice, but then as well, like depending on the extension case as well, close to the application you want to extend into the region in which this is running. So it's not just a pure Kubernetes that we provide, it's really a Kubernetes plus X. And so what are those components that we put on top? And we looked at ourselves, like when starting with the whole endeavor of Kyma, by thinking about, okay, what are those pieces that we need when we build software on Kubernetes, when we want to run it on Kubernetes? What does it mean? Like, what do we need? And the first thing which comes to mind is, well, you need to expose functionality to the internet. So if you know Kubernetes already, it's not news to you, but everything that you run in the Kubernetes cluster is shielded from the outside world. It's not accessible from the outside. So of course, to extend solutions or to reach something from a mobile app, from an online shop or whatsoever, I mean, you need to provide APIs. So an API gateway is part of the Kyma runtime. Plus, I mean, for event-driven architectures, you want to react to business events coming from those solutions. So eventing is built in. And I mean, right now we use an eventing framework, which is running inside the cluster. With our next Kyma release coming later this month, we plan to provide then as well the possibility to switch to SAP Event Mesh. And for example, I've got this already running in our Canary landscape. So again, the release is planned for later or for mid this month, actually, to then as well enable, give you the possibility to switch to SAP Event Mesh. Then, like with microservices and like the whole paradigm of like containerizing them, you need to be able to control how they talk to each other. So the service mesh, like it's called a service mesh, what you need, and this is included as well in the Kyma runtime. Plus then a serverless engine, so that you can just deploy, for example, code in an inline editor, or you can connect to a Git repository, which is then pulling the code in there, and in the background, it's packaging it up in a container. And then last but not least, there's monitoring and logging included, which means that you can control as well, or you can monitor like what's going on inside your Kyma runtime out of the box. So all of that plus like first of all of those components, I mean, many of those are open source frameworks. So again, you could say, well, I can run those as well on the hyperscaler, but of course you have to operate it on their own. Plus then the integration into the business technology platform with like the consumption of other SAP services, with the out-of-the-box connectivity to cloud solutions, with a planned on-premise connectivity via the cloud connector and so on. These are all the components then which make the Kyma runtime unique or tied into the SAP universe. Plus some more technical components which we all put together for the Kyma runtime to really have a fully like a ready-to-go Kubernetes environment, again, tied into the SAP universe. And this is really what's making Kyma then unique as part of the business technology platform compared to anything that the hyperscalers can offer. And then, of course, all is covered by like the normal SAP support, so enterprise support cloud edition, which means, I mean, it's always well important to consider, like when, again, purely comparing this to offerings from other vendors. I mean, of course, you want to have like 24/7 support and the standard SAP SLAs and so on, as well applying to the runtime. So this is all what makes the Kyma runtime, so to say, unique and making it the service that you get in the BTP. So just to summarize, what can you do with it? I mean, you can build event-based extensions or applications. You have as well an in-cluster eventing, so you can really build up a whole event-driven architecture. Then you can, of course, build like publish APIs, so you can have synchronous flows as well coming from your solution. So we've got one customer who extended in a Cloud for Customer solution by adding a UI, and the functionality behind that UI is actually running in the Kyma runtime. And then we've got like you've got a server that you can build those things as a serverless function or as well as microservices, and then run them in the Kyma runtime. And they really scale up highly. I mean, the whole environment, the whole Kyma runtime is scaling up quite highly. And this is where I would rather go into a demo than continue talking. So just to give you a glimpse and to point you as well into the places where you can get started. So if you want to explore it on your own, of course, you can do that as well. So just switching to my browser. So of course, like the Kyma runtime itself is described in the service catalog here of the Discovery Center. So you can see again the description, but then more important, there are related missions. And one, for example, is how to create, for example, like an address verification with the third-party service based on like accounts which you create Cloud for Customers. So you've got like a nice step-by-step examples here or tutorials here how to set this up. And there are more missions, like a getting started mission, but then as well like more things like that you can see here and that you can explore. Plus, as a developer, like if you really just want to get your hands dirty, so to say, with the Kyma runtime, there are some missions like really some high-level ones to get started, like more on the UI basis, or a full stack application that you would deploy where the tutorial or tutorials take you through deploying a database, then deploying an MS SQL, like deploying an MS SQL database, exposing the API and putting a UI on top of it. So it really takes a step-by-step through it. So you can, even though if you don't like know Kubernetes yet, you can go through this and just to get an idea on what you can do with the runtime. And of course, I mean, you can run kub-based applications inside Kyma. I mean, you need to containerize them in a Docker container, but then you can as well deploy them in Kyma. So we've got several tutorials here as well. So again, all of this, of course, is on sap.com. You can as well use the trial account to get started and walk through those missions so that you get an idea like how to interact with the Kyma runtime or with the command line interface, and then with the Kubernetes cluster underneath. Plus, like on github.com, we've got a number of samples. So the missions relate to those samples, but those samples here are not listed in any particular order, but they are based really on customer and partner discussions that we have, where we see, for example, a question, I don't know, how to communicate with cloud integration. So, for example, already now you can use SAP Cloud Integration to talk to your on-premise systems. So, of course, like then we say, okay, well, this is important for for many more people, for many more companies. So we write it down here on github.com to give you, again, just sort of say food for thought on what you can do with the Kyma runtime in the SAP context. But now really going into like one global account. So if there's an empty sub account, of course, your browser session expires once in a while. But besides that, if you go into an empty sub account and you've got Kyma entitled, then you can go to, and now it's gone. Great. So 1 second. So let me just entitle one more, like a Kyma runtime, for example, on AWS. Just to give you an idea, like, and why am I doing this, or why am I starting here? I mean, it gives you an idea on what flexibility you have when you say you want to enable Kyma. So what you can do this in this wizard is, first of all, you can select the region, like where this runtime is going, like being spun up. And due to the fact that you really get your own runtime, like independently of the sub-account region, you have more flexibility. Like, for example, you can create this in Mumbai, you can create this in many more regions, because you really get this an isolated environment, which is really just for your access. So you select any region, and then afterwards you can as well say, okay, this is now AWS specific a bit, but you can really define what machine types, like what machine you want to use. And this means, like, if you know the AWS specifications, I mean, this is, for example, with 8 CPUs and 32 gigabytes of memory each, up to like 48 CPUs and 192 gigabytes of memory each virtual machine. And out of those virtual machines, you can have, the minimum is always 2, and you can go up to 40 of those virtual machines. So you can put a lot of compute power inside the Kyma runtime and like provide it. Of course, it's not consuming it like all the time, but it's really then auto scaling to the maximum that you define here. So it can really cover quite a high workload if you need that, for example. Once it's created, just that it, like, to get the whole flow, like you can jump here from, like you can then jump from the overview page to the dashboard, and then you get into the Kyma runtime where you, for example, see the monitoring and the logging here. And this is then where you can really start deploying your containers. So for example, like one tutorial, as I said, like what it does is it talks about deploying an MS SQL database, which needs, of course, like hard disk space. So you, again, this is a bit Kubernetes specific, but you claim a volume, which you can do, like you can claim then a hard disk access. And then afterwards, for example, like you use those definition files to then say, okay, where do I want to get this? And then you deploy it into the Kyma runtime and it starts spinning it up. So if I won't go through it like completely, but if I just start with with this, then I do this, like I get the persistent volume, which means I say I need 100. Okay. I need 100 megabytes. So this already exists from a previous walkthrough. But then I say, okay, I want to now deploy the MS SQL database in there, and then it starts like getting those resources from, for example, from Docker Hub in this case, and starts deploying the database, and then I can continue by adding, for example, exposing it via API and so on and so forth. So again, I mean, if you want to like have a look, just like take a look at those samples here. I will, of course, send around as well those links here in as part of the slides. So you can already start getting an idea on what we can do, like what you can do with it. Just to finish up, to not take too much time of it, like of your of the Stammtisch. Like, what's the outlook? Like, where do we want to go with Kyma now next? So one is, as I said, I mean, later this month, we plan to provide then with the next Kyma release, Kyma open source release, the option to move to SAP event mesh, actually. So to the SAP event bus, which means then as well that like digesting events coming from S4 on-prem or S4 cloud and SuccessFactors and so on will become much easier. Then we plan to provide as well very soon the on-premise connectivity to like via the cloud connector and so on and so forth, so that this is possible as well with the Kyma runtime, as it's not yet. And then we want to offer as well a Google Cloud Platform as an option to deploy the Kyma runtime in there, and then as well support more BTP services inside, like to be consumable directly from within Kyma. So, for example, HANA Cloud right now, you need to still instantiate via Cloud Foundry and then use those secrets in the Kyma runtime to make use of the database. And this is not where we want to stop, because in the end, we like, as the runtimes and core organization, our strategy is that you should pick the technology that you want, Cloud Foundry or Kyma, for example, independently of the services that you want to consume in your project. I mean, the type of service that you need in your particular development project should not define the runtime itself. That's where we want to get away from. So really to have any service available in any runtime. I mean, that's really the goal that we want to reach, so that you can pick the technology that you need, because we want to give you the choice of going for Cloud Foundry, going for Kyma, of course, as well going for ABAP, and still consuming any service which is provided by SAP. So with that, I would stop here and see if there are any questions or any feedback to this, any thoughts. I mean, again, I'll send those slides to David so that they can be distributed. So they include all the links that I've been that I was showing, samples on GitHub and so on and so forth, so that you don't need to like quickly write down any URL, but you really get those information and you can access this later on.
For sure, Marco. We will do.
Thank you, Marco.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Thanks
are there
a lot.
any questions?
Yes, maybe we can also have 3-4 minutes for question and answer, of course.
Sure.
Sure.
Marco, I have one quick thing about the Kyma runtime and how you end up selecting the region.
Sure.
So, I think it would be very useful if you end up highlighting somehow, or at least stating that the closest region to where your sub-account is selected, because your sub-account already has a region, right? So in the end, if it would be possible to highlight, like, you know what, this is the closest region, because I remember I enabled the Kyma runtime not long ago on my sub-account, and then I had to select that region. I was like, well, I don't know which one of these European ones is the closest to where my sub-account is. In a way, you want to remain as close as possible, right? So you have less latency and all that sort of stuff. So I was wondering, this is more of a feedback. It would be great if you would be able to highlight, because my sub-account was already running in AWS, so I know AWS. And although it's good to have the flexibility of, if I want to deploy the Kyma runtime in the US environment, I can. But at the same time, it would be good to sort of know which one is the closest to me, so that everything remains, I don't know. I think that would be quite helpful.
No, that's good feedback, and I need to check how we could realize that, to at least in the pop-up, like, say, these are the options, like these are the regions, and by the way, your sub account is in region ABC.
Yeah, something like that. And on-premise connectivity is a huge one.
Yes.
Can we expect that before the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's good to know.
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, of course. We are on tape, right? So I can't. I mean, of course, I can't give any commitments, and there can always be trouble and so on.
No.
But I would say we are close, really, to the finish line, and we are really close. And the problem is, why does it take us? Like, why does it take so long? So what you get with the Kyma runtime is, again, you get your isolated Kubernetes cluster. And so inside that cluster, you need to then, or we need to, and this is exactly the point where we're at right now, or the last step, we need to deploy a certain connectivity proxy, which then goes through your sub account to the cloud connector and then to the on-prem system. And so having this component up and running and easily, like, deployed automatically and then easily up and running and configurable by you, that's exactly the last step that we now need to take to then say it's there.
Cool.
Yes, Just a little comment from my side. We all remember that we are right now in a Stamtisch. No, we are not in an official SAP event. So, of course, we are very happy to have Marco here presenting some topics from Kyma and other runtimes, but for official answers, of course, maybe this is not no, of course, we believe in your answers, but I know that we are here between friends. We are just sharing knowledge, and we are very happy to have you here, but that don't be under pressure.
No. That's totally fine.
Okay.
It was more of a joke. No, absolutely. It was more of a joke. But I mean, I know the demand, and this comes up
Yes.
in every discussion. I totally understand that. Absolutely. So I mean, what I do is I work with colleagues on the on the stakeholder management and the enablement for Kyma. So we get like those questions, I mean, pretty much in every presentation. So I would be so happy to then very soon answer this with yes, this is how it goes. And again, we are close to the finish line now, finally.
Okay, thanks. When possible tomorrow, send me the slides, and we also
Sure.
If I'm not wrong, we will also upload the recording and the slides in our website. So fine. Okay. Okay, then thanks a lot.